Congressman Cheney. Thank you for your loyal opposition at a great personal cost. And loyal opposition for me is the foundation of democracy. So if success is how much you bounce back when you hit button, has democracy already hit button and is about to bounce back? Amid all the fatalistic warning about the fragility of democracy, how democracy died or the twilight of democracy, are we confident at this moment to make a case for the resilience of democracy? And what would you want to say about that?
Thank you. It's a very important point. I think that I would say first that there are elections that haven't yet been decided that are really important in this regard. What happens in Arizona, what happens in Nevada, those elections will determine whether or not we have put people in office who have told us they won't respect the results of future elections in states that are very important for the 24 presidential race. So the threat remains, but nobody should bet against democracy. And I think that what we're seeing and what showed up in the results on Tuesday is that the majority of the American people, regardless of party, do not want to watch the Constitution be torched and will stand up against that. And I think it was really a heartening thing to see. And again, I think it's very clear. We all have an obligation. You can't sort of sit back and say, okay, the threat's passed. It hasn't. But we also need to know that our democracy, while fragile, has survived, for 246 years. And with the commitment of the majority of the people who believe in our constitutional foundation, it will continue to survive and thrive for many, many more.
You've said in the past that you're a classical Republican, a defender of limited, accountable government, and that your goal is to defend democracy. Surely democracy means that we, the people of the United States, are the ones who choose who will sit in the Oval Office. How then is that consistent with your stated goal to, quote, do whatever it takes to make sure Donald Trump isn't anywhere near the Oval Office? Thank you.
It's precisely because I care so deeply for our democracy and precisely because I believe so strongly that we, the people, have to speak. And as I watch what's unfolding in my party, and as I watch people who know better suggest that they could support him again, the democracy cannot survive a president who's willing to blow through all the guardrails of that democracy. And I say this as somebody who voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time. I am a conservative Republican. I am more conservative than most of the members of my conference who are now suggesting that they're going to support Donald Trump for president again. This is not about policy. But I also know the incredible power that we entrust to our presidents. And when you entrust that power, and when someone swears an oath, and the president's oath in particular, to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed, brings with it an obligation to defend all the branches of our government, brings with it a particular obligation to defend how our government functions, and brings with it an obligation to, as all citizens have, abide by the rulings of the courts. So when you have a president who ignores the rulings of the courts, who ignores the legitimate outcome of an election, who knows that there is a mob that he has summoned that is angry and is armed, and sends them to march on the Capitol to stop the counting of electoral votes, to stop the peaceful transfer of power, that's a danger that we can't sustain. We entrust our president with these things. And I ask people to think about, because sometimes when you talk about what Donald Trump did, we do all become numb. So think about if Dwight Eisenhower had summoned a mob to Washington, an armed mob, and sent them to march on the Supreme Court during the arguments on Brown v. Board. And then when the mob was there attacking the court, refused to tell them to leave, and instead sent a message further inciting them. It is completely unimaginable because Dwight Eisenhower was an honorable man. He never would have done anything like that. But if you disagree with everything else that I've said about the outcome of the election and the rulings of the courts and the process by which the election was conducted, if you disagree with all of that, think to yourself, what kind of human being sits in the dining room next to the Oval Office and watches the violent assault on television? And there are Capitol Police officers here today who fought that battle. It was medieval, armed, hand-to-hand combat. Look at the video. Donald Trump sat and watched that. People came in and pleaded with him and said, you are the only one. You have to tell them to go home. And he wouldn't do it? What kind of a human being is that? And so I understand the threat of a president who won't honor our elections and the sanctity of our election process. And that person can never be president again. You can disagree with me, but I am never going to change my view on that.
So what's next for you?
Obviously, I'm going to be working on the select committee and finishing out my time as Wyoming's representative. And then I'll make some decisions after that. As I said, Tuesday was a very good day, but this battle is far from over. And, when I have said the most important thing is to make sure Donald Trump is nowhere near the Oval Office ever again, that commitment remains. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that that's the case.
Well, it seems as though at the same time that Donald Trump's star fell this week, Ron DeSantis' star rose substantially. How do you see his role as the future potential leader of a Republican Party?
I think that the Republican Party has a lot of future potential leaders.
Diplomatically put, unsurprisingly.